皆さん、おはようございます。
おはようございます。
それでは、北東アジア非核兵器地帯設置を目指す国際議員連盟をプレゼンさせていただきます。まずはじめに、原口稼働大よりご挨拶をお願いいたします。
皆さん、おはようございます。本当にお忙しい中、ありがとうございます。今日はアメリカからモートン・ハルペリン教授が、このオンラインを通してお話をいただきます。P3 プラス3、北東アジア非核兵器地帯設置を目指す国際議員連盟、昨年の9月の28日に、ワシントン DC の、キャピトルヒルで、お話をさせていただきました。本当に皆さんありがとうございます。今日はそこにご出席の方全員と、それと、大島総先生、韓国の方でもご出席いただいて、それから矢田智弘先生、ありがとうございます。そして、何よりも、我が事務局長、山田局長、国会に戻ってきました。ありがとうございます。ほんの短い間でしたけど、圧勝ということでおめでとうございます。今日は長い話をいたしません。今、世界全体が非常にきな臭くなっています。核戦争が起きるのは、誰かが意図して核兵器を使った場合だけではなくて、むしろミスコミュニケーション、長崎のこの議連のアドバイザーである鈴木達郎先生のお話を聞けば、もうその通りだと思います。一刻も早く核廃絶をする。そして、北東アジアには核の傘ではなくて、非核の傘を差す。このことに全力で取り組みたいと思います。今日はこの後、ハルペリン教授から特に中国行きですね。近藤先生の役割は非常に大きいと思います。これを目指してですね、お話があると思いますので、ハルペリン教授にも心からお礼を申し上げ、冒頭の皆様への感謝と私たちの決意に変えたいと思います。今日はどうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
それでは、モートン・ハルペリン先生からのご講演を頂戴いたします。
今、LINE でつなげている最中ですので、すみません。今日やっていただいた通り、他の講演の内容は、大会3プラス3の議員団で中国に行くという予定をしています。その中国に行ったときに一体どういう準備をして、どういう形で中国政府にアプローチをするかということを、今日は中心的な課題でお話ししていただく予定なんです。でもう一つ、原口代表には申し上げたんですけど、7月の、28だと思いますが、ジュネーブの、NPT の検討会議の準備委員会で、一応3プラス3のお部屋をサイドイベントで取ってます。でそこでもう一度、その NGO を中心とした作業会みたいなものを、中国を説得って言いますか、中国のイニシアティブをもらうために作っていこうという準備を今しておりますので、代表、そして近藤先生の力をですね、これからお借りをして、また口先生の方からNGO のネットワークも紹介をしていただいてますので、これから今日のこのお手元にある講演の内容を使ってですね、準備をしていきたいというふうに考えております。どうぞよろしくお願いします。すみません。今、つなげますので、すみません。
時代の間に、何の衝突が生まれましたこれ、3プラス3の対象は区切ってなくているので、台湾自身の もちろん、バッタを人間に勉強するし、何らかの学生できているかなと言っているのが、中国に関してっていうことだけではないような気がするんですけど、そのあたりはどうでしょうね。昨日なんか、台湾のあれとか、そういう台湾、の就任式に日本から30人くらいみんな行ってたって、
そうですね。あれ、逆に言うと、そのディバイダールールに乗ってしまうと良くないんでですね。そこは気をつけながらやりたいと思います。政権もいろんなことに一つにするということをやってますので、
これで私がアルペンさんに今の番号を伝えてくれると思います。
いつから先生のありがとうございます。これを。何ることですかね。
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Halperin, excuse us for the connection confusions. How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Can you
hear us?
あ、こっちで。Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, right. Very nice to meet you again.
Nice to see you. Sorry, I couldn't get online.
It was our
Connection errors. So I'm happy you are here with us this morning. And here,
this
parliamentarian office building,
we get together.
the
The
members
members of the parliamentarians for 3+3, and we already briefed the content of the presentation. So when you are ready, can you start the presentation, please?
先生、こっちです。
I'm- Hello? I'm sorry, I haven't heard you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
we
could.
Okay. Shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
It's a great pleasure to me to be here today, even if only by Zoom, to discuss the critical issue of preventing a nuclear war in Northeast Asia and the role that a nuclear weapons-free zone might play in that process. I want to focus on the question of how to proceed now in ways that are possible to try to move forward towards a nuclear weapon-free zone, and how we can focus on getting the necessary support to turn from all the countries in the region. Let me begin by discussing briefly positive and negative security assurances and the question of whether they are compatible with a nuclear weapons-free zone. I would argue that both are compatible and indeed necessary components of such a zone. Positive security assurances are the same as the nuclear umbrella. It is a promise to come to the aid of a non-nuclear weapon state threatened with nuclear weapons by a nuclear weapon state. It does not require that there be a promise that the response to use nuclear weapons be the use of nuclear weapons by the country providing the umbrella. Rather, as I understand the nuclear umbrella, it is a promise that there will be a response to any use or threat of use of nuclear weapons that is an effective strike. It is a promise that the guarantee state will respond in a way that is effective and contributes to deterrence. In fact, the U.S. government has for some time, as I understand it, told the South Korean government that its response to a North Korean use of nuclear weapons is not likely to be the use of nuclear weapons by the United States, but rather an overwhelming conventional attack designed to remove the current government from power and to end the conflict before additional nuclear weapons are used. In any case, the implied promise to use nuclear weapons only takes into effect when the attack is with nuclear weapons. And there is no conflict, therefore, between a positive nuclear assurance and a commitment to no first use, because there already have been use before the state responds with nuclear weapons. Negative security assurances is the promise of no first use against non-nuclear weapon states, and is again an integral part of a nuclear weapons-free zone rather than incompatible with such a zone. States in the zone that do not have nuclear weapons seek assurance that the nuclear weapon states will not use nuclear weapons against them. For the U.S. government, this means a guarantee not to introduce the nuclear weapons into the region. Both China and Russia have made commitments not to use nuclear weapons first and not to store their nuclear weapons in other countries, and thus should be open to such a promise in the context of a nuclear weapons-free zone. The United States has made such a commitment in connection with the Latin American nuclear-free zone, so there is a precedent for it doing so in other situations, such as this in Northeast Asia. In Northeast Asia, the focus has been and continues to be on the role of North Korea, with attempts over time to prevent and later to freeze and now to roll back North Korea's nuclear programs. These efforts have taken many forms, but in the end, as we know, they have all failed. I want to suggest two approaches which I think hold promise as a way forward. First, let me briefly review what we have tried in the past. Initially, the hope was that North Korea would adhere to the global anti-nuclear weapons treaty and structure of commitments and treaty forums, and that it did do so. It signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It signed the Test Ban Treaty, and it looked like it was going to behave as a non-nuclear weapon state consistent with the obligations of those two treaties. But over time, the North Koreans did not continue to observe their obligations under those two treaties, and this effort fell apart. And the North Koreans finally left the Non-Proliferation Treaty and began to develop their own nuclear weapons. From time to time, another approach was a bilateral negotiation between the governments of North Korea and the United States, sometimes with the government of Japan participating. And the effort was to agree on a set of measures which would include the denuclearization of North Korea, but did not include any commitments on the part of South Korea or Japan or the United States to limit their nuclear deployments or to make additional treaty commitments not to develop or to use or to station nuclear weapons on their territory. This effort also worked for some time, but there was, in fact, an agreement which was put into effect, but eventually it fell apart and the North Koreans removed their nuclear program. Another attempt was the six-party talks and the attempt to develop a set of arrangements for security in Northeast Asia. Again, that appeared hopeful for some time and then failed. Then there was a brief period in which the other powers, the United States, Russia, and China, were working together through the UN Security Council, using their ability to lead the Council to adopt binding measures and passing binding measures which prohibited the North Koreans from developing nuclear weapons and testing missiles and testing nuclear weapons. And this again seemed to be working for some time, but as the relationship between the three nuclear powers fell apart, this process is no longer working, and it is difficult to see how it might come back again. And finally, we had a rather bizarre episode of the personal contacts and negotiations between the President of the United States and the President of the DPRK. Again, like all the other efforts, it seemed to be working for a brief time, and then it was suddenly came to a halt. And I think it's unlikely, even if Mr. Trump is reelected president, for it to be resumed as the way forward. So that I'm not optimistic about resuming any of the methods that have been tried in the past. And I want to suggest an alternative way to get started and to move forward and hopefully eventually reach a nuclear weapons-free zone, which includes North Korea denuclearized in a verified way. And what I suggest is that we focus on getting ready for the time when those negotiations will be possible by laying out the concessions that the United States, Japan, and South Korea are prepared to make in the concept of North Korea agreeing to denuclearize itself, and then actually doing so in a way that's verified, in a verified manner that's acceptable to the other states in the region. And I suggest that the United States, Japan, and South Korea create a working group to figure out what concessions they're prepared to make, what commitments they're prepared to make to the countries in the region, if the North Koreans will agree to a verified denuclearization, including the dismantling of their capability to develop and produce nuclear weapons. And that would have several elements. First, the three governments would agree to announce now the commitments they appear to be made when such agreement is possible, rather than as in the past, waiting for North Korea to agreement with North Korea before they move forward with other items. The key elements of such an offer would be the following. First, Japan and South Korea would express the willingness to join a nuclear weapons-free zone as nuclear weapon states if North Korea was also prepared to join such a zone, and if prior to the creation of the zone, North Korea would denuclearize according to an agreed and verified process that would have the support of Japan, United States, Russia, and China. Second, Japan and the Republic of Korea would commit themselves not to permit nuclear weapons, either American nuclear weapons or the nuclear weapons of any other nuclear weapon state, to be stationed on their territory, and would permit IAEA inspections of that commitment. The United States, third, the ROK and Japan would agree to accept the same inspection of their denuclear status after the North Koreans had denuclearized as North Korea accepted. So that going forward, the three countries would accept the same inspections under agreement, which provided for the details of regular and comprehensive inspections to be sure that the country remained denuclearized. The three powers should also make public a comprehensive report which spells out in detail what these restrictions would be for each of the programs and activities that would be limited, and what inspections they are prepared to accept. This report should stress reciprocity. That is, the same exact requirements would apply to all three countries, the DPRK, the ROK, and Japan, once North Korea had completed the verified elimination of their existing nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons production capability. The United States government, for its part, would commit to joining such a nuclear weapons-free zone and not to threaten or use nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear weapon state party to that treaty, nor to store nuclear weapons on the territory of any state party. This would be, in fact, a major concession for the United States, which has continued to assert the right to use nuclear weapons first and to station nuclear weapons on the territory of other countries. In fact, the United States still stations nuclear weapons on several countries in Europe, although it is believed that it does not station nuclear weapons on any countries outside of Europe. But here it would be making a commitment to not, a treaty commitment not to deploy nuclear weapons, not to station them on the countries part of the nuclear weapons free zone. The United States has done that in connection with the Latin American nuclear weapons free zone. And so there would be a precedent for it doing so here, and I think it would be possible to get the agreement of the United States to do that. The United States would also provide negative and positive security assurances on nuclear weapon states, part of the nuclear weapons free zone, as would Russia and China, and also the other two nuclear weapon states under the NPT, the UK and France. It would be made clear as this agreement was being negotiated that the United States and China and the United States and South Korea and Japan all viewed the United States nuclear umbrella over Japan and Republic of Korea as fully compatible with the nuclear weapons free zone and fully compatible with the commitments that the three countries announced that they are prepared to make to move us towards a nuclear weapons free zone. And the three countries would make clear in the course of negotiating a nuclear weapons free zone that it was not in any way inconsistent with them providing the nuclear umbrella. The report that I suggest the three countries prepare would also spell out other steps that they are prepared to take as part of the package in bringing into existence a nuclear weapons-free zone and a more general security zone for Northeast Asia. Such actions would include the end of the trade embargo on North Korea, the provision of economic assistance to the North Korean government, a peace treaty ending the Korean War, and the establishing of normal diplomatic relations by the countries that become party to the nuclear weapons-free zone. And of course, we can discuss the details of each of those as we move forward this evening. The report should also propose the creation of a six-party forum, not only to deal with issues that arise under the nuclear weapons-free zone, but other issues affecting the security of the countries in the region, including conventional force limitations and limitations on military exercise conducted in the zone and outside of it by the countries that are parties to the treaty. The key demand that would be made to have this set of agreements come into effect would be that North Korea agree to and carry out a program which would lead over some period of time to the nuclear disarmament of North Korea with complete and agreed verification. This would be a step-by-step process leading to the permanent destruction of the current DPRK stockpile and its production facilities and its delivery systems, and also its capacity to make the weapons and the delivery systems. In order to have all parties to have confidence in that the denuclearization is complete, there would need to be an intrusive and comprehensive denuclearization process, perhaps supervised by the IAEA. Once the process was completed to the satisfaction of the six powers, inspection going forward would be, as I've said, the same for the three non-nuclear nuclear weapon states. Let me say a word about another reason, a reason why I think China may be particularly interested in it. My view is that China is less worried about a DPRK nuclear program and even an ROK nuclear program than it is about a Japanese nuclear program, which it thinks would be part of a remilitarization of Japan, which would be aimed at confrontation with China. And therefore, anything that makes it less likely that Japan will get nuclear weapons is something, in my view, of great interest to China. Here we are saying that Japan will be perceived to undertake a new treaty commitment, one joined in by the United States and one made jointly to the six countries of the region, that Japan will not develop nuclear weapons, will obey a treaty commitment not to do so. I think this would add to China's interest in persuading North Korea to agree to denuclearize so that they would get this nuclear weapons guarantee from Japan. I suggest, if they're interested in this proposal, that the NGO community take the lead in NGOs from Japan, South Korea, and the United States coming together to spell out this proposal, to do a mock-up of what a full report from the three governments might look like, then to seek the support of NGOs from around the world, and then approach one of the three governments, or perhaps all three simultaneously, and urge them to agree to undertake this process, to announce that they're doing so, to then proceed to negotiate and develop and draft the report that I've outlined. And then when it is ready, to take it to China and to Russia, and then if you can get the support of those three countries, to approach North Korea to negotiate that package before the North Koreans agree to denuclearization and the inspection measures that would have to occur to denuclearization, with everybody's understanding that the package would not go into effect until that denuclearization of North Korea was not only agreed to, but actually fully implemented. Happy to take questions and to discuss any aspects of this proposal as we move forward. But before I stop, I want to suggest one other possible way to move forward, which is much less comprehensive and much less bold, but I think could provide a way to begin process of focusing on the need to denuclearize North Korea. And that's to follow what happened in Ukraine when the Russians suggested, when President Putin suggested that Russia might threaten or even use nuclear weapons if certain events happened in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There was a great public outcry, not only from NGOs, but to my great surprise, from many governments, including the Chinese government, denouncing Russia for suggesting that nuclear weapons might be used and declaring that such use or even threat of use was impermissible. The most surprising statement came from the G20 at its meeting in Indonesia, where it announced that the use of nuclear weapons was inadmissible. China joined that statement and indeed seems to have played an important role in persuading the G20 to adopt this position. The Chinese themselves issued a statement which I found extraordinary and I think is worth quoting in full. The Chinese said, nuclear weapons must not be used, nuclear war must not be fought. The threat or use of nuclear weapons should be opposed. Nuclear proliferation must be prevented and nuclear crises avoided. I think the Chinese should be approached and asked whether they do not believe that the same posture must be adopted for Northeast Asia as was adopted in response of Ukraine, which, by the way, had no geographic limit to what the Chinese demanded. The Chinese government to be approached to suggest that it undertake on behalf to bring together the countries of Northeast Asia as the countries of the G20 were brought together to adopt a statement, but this one, like the full statement that the Chinese made, and to see if that could be the beginning of a process of discussing how to solidify this agreement not to use nuclear weapons in Northeast Asia. Let me stop there. I very much appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and to engage in this very important discussion. And I'm happy to answer questions or respond to comments or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Halperin. Because of the limitation
The
of
setting of this video meeting, I'm sure you cannot see all of us. This morning, we are 10 MPs from different political parties, and next to me, PEP Plus Vice President, Representative Haraguchi.
Very nice to meet you again.
Next to Haraguchi, Representative Kondo. He has a very strong tie with Chinese political sphere. And then our Secretary General, Representative Yamada, cannot see, probably, but he's here. And Representative Yada is from Okinawa, is very keen to this issue, he's been participating in this. And next to Representative Yada, Representative Abe, he joined us, come to the Washington, D.C. last September 28th. And appreciate your keynote speech. She's very supportive. Next to Representative Abe, Representative Kikuchi. She's been working very closely with non-governmental organizations in Japan, in China. So your last suggestion could be working with Representative Kikuchi's network. And Representative Matsuki, he's been very supportive this initiative with us. Probably next time he will join us in Washington, D.C. And then Representative Kozu, he's very interested in the subject. And Representative Oshima, he is joined us with a visit to the ROK Parliament last year. So we are here. And one more time, thank you very much for your very comprehensive suggestion and very down to the art what we could do from now on. I again has to point out that your work in 1990s with President Clinton was very crucial. And it was very close. I understand that President Clinton was about to visit North Korea, thanks to your leadership as well. But now, as you reviewed already,
Next step would be to, number one, to come up with a report agreed upon by United States, South Korea, and Japan. And probably such a report should be prepared by somehow NGO's technical working group, so that we can work in detail, as you suggested, the outline of this the report. And then the second suggestion you made was how to approach the possibility of approaching the Chinese government, PRC government leadership, based on the G20 announcement, historical announcement of nuclear war cannot be, fought, or nobody is winning this, and we have to avoid, especially in the Northeast Asia area, for such a catastrophe. And it's very, very possible that Chinese NGOs, along with Japanese and South Korean and US NGOs, could prepare somehow agreeable technical statements. From there, we can work on it. And I'm sure we will consult with you in the near future. And may I ask your permission to use the script of this your presentation for preparing these activities?
Sure, of course. I'd be happy to have you do that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to ask questions from the participating MPs now.
Okay.
質問がありましたら、どうぞお願いします。
Thank you very much for your presentation, Dr. Harvey. I'm Yara, representing Okinawa. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for inspiring suggestion. I think that's give us the future hope for this certain world in Northeast Asia. Well, I'd like to ask you a question that you have mentioned about no first use of nuclear weapons. That's workable even both positive security assurance and negative security assurance. But it comes to think about no first use. It's United States do not declare the no first use. Do you think is it popular policy amongst the policymakers in Washington about the Biden administration will assure the world that no first use policy?
It's a difficult issue in the United States. For some reason, it is a very intense partisan political issue. The Republican Party is very strongly against no first use, which they view as a promise to Russia and China and other potential enemies of the United States that we will not use nuclear weapons first, regardless of what they do. And they point to massing of conventional forces or surprise conventional attack and say there's nothing to be gained by promising not to use nuclear weapons. But nuclear weapons, promises not to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states is, I think, less controversial in the United States and not as difficult to matter. And the negative and positive security assurances in the nuclear weapons-free zone would apply. The positive and negative security assurances would only apply to the non-nuclear states. That is, the United States would not be promising Japan, China or Russia that it would not use nuclear weapons first. It would simply be promising North Korea, Japan, and South Korea that it would not be used nuclear weapons first. So that I think in the context of getting a complete denuclearization of North Korea and a statement by the South Korean government and the Japanese government that they were comfortable with such nuclear assurances essentially to North Korea, as part of the process of getting denuclearization, that it would be acceptable in the United States as well.
Thank you very much. 矢田先生、よろしいですか？私やります。I will permit me to translate into Japanese, the conversations. 今、矢田先生からのご質問ですけれども、端的に言えば、アメリカとして先制不使用という政策を採択することができるのかと。この話は以前からありまして、噂によれば日本政府の要請によって先制不使用というものをアメリカが採択しなかったというような経緯もあり、仮に北東アジア非核兵器地帯条約において実質的にアメリカが担保するのは先制不使用なんですね。で、もちろん核の抑止力というものをどう考えるか。核抑止を認めるのかっていう話にまでこれ行く話なんですけど、ちょっとそれを置いといて、先制不使用をアメリカが行うということについては、全世界的に先制不使用をするというのはかなりハードルが高いだろうと。しかしながら、北東アジアのこの非核兵器地帯条約のこの地域において、日米同盟と北東アジア非核兵器地帯条約のこの両立を図るために先制不使用をアメリカが宣言することは十分可能だろうと。いう答えでした。先生、よろしいですか？ Thank you very much.
Can I ask follow-up questions in the outline? To ask you a question that time frame. When will you announce the no first use to the world?
Well, I think we announce it as part of this package that I'm suggesting Japan, the United States, and South Korea offer once they agree on the text and the content of the. Would it be easier if I stopped after 2 sentences and let you translate?
Of course. 今の矢田先生から一体これはアメリカが先制不使用を宣言するのはいつなんだという質問がありました。で、その答えは今まさにそれを話しているところで、アメリカと韓国と日本の3カ国が何とかしてこの北東アジアの地において核兵器というものについての共通の立場というものを表明するべきであると。この表明をするにあたってはそのレポートを出すべきであると。そのレポートの準備の仕方をずっと今30分話していただいたんですけれども、そのレポートの中に核の共通のスタンスというものの中にアメリカの先制不使用が入っているということになります。
One of the important elements of this proposal is that these would be future promises. These 3 countries agree to do certain things after North Korea has denuclearized under an agreed inspection procedure. So the United States would not be offering an immediate no first use promise to North Korea, but would say it would make that commitment when North Korea had denuclearized.
もちろんですね、北朝鮮が実際に今持っている核兵器を廃棄をする IAEA の査察のもとにこれを廃棄していくということがこの提案の前提になりますので、そういうことが実際に行われたときにはもちろんアメリカは先制不使用の宣言をすることができるということです。He said it's just like a discussion of chicken first or egg first. That's the I understand your explanation was ごめんなさいね、ちょっと今お話をしていただいてたのは、今そういう鳥が先か卵が先かという議論でいろいろなアプローチで長年やってきたけども、すべて失敗してるんですよ。で、それはなぜかというと、北朝鮮の核兵器というものを前面に出して、それがない限りは、決して議論が前に進まないというスタンスを一応取っていき続けた。そうではない。もしそういう事態があったならば、一体どういう世界の絵が描けるのかということをまず話しましょう。で、その絵というのは中国のリーダーシップで描いていきましょうというのがお話なので、 単純に鶏が先か、卵が先かっていう今までそうだったんですけど、そういう議論ではなくて、じゃあ共通のこれができた時の絵を共有しましょうという話です。Excuse me, it was too long, but yes, you understood, I think.
Thank you.
大丈夫ですか？
ありがとうございます。Dr. Harvey, thank you very much.
安倍さん。
Thank you for a nice presentation. And I'd like to ask you, non-first use approach might be effective in the northeast area, but how about another area? For example, Palestine and Ukraine. There are many battles in these states, and they say that we want to use the nuclear weapons. Some person in Israel or in your country says that was. So how about the non-first use?
Well, I think so. I think the ideal thing would be that the whole world was covered by different nuclear weapons-free zones, and that's the goal that we ought to work for.
安倍先生のご質問は、この北東アジア非核兵器地帯条約の話で、ノンファーストユース、核兵器の先制不使用をアメリカが言うということはいいんだけれども、じゃあ、ウクライナ等々、世界中の他の地域はどうなるんですかというご質問に対して、ハルペリン博士の答えは、もちろん、世界中に、今、南半球全部カバーしてますけれども、こういう非核兵器地帯条約を世界中に広げていくというのが、もちろん我々のゴールです。
It's more efficient to do that one by one because there are different problems and different roadblocks in each area of the world.
それぞれ世界のいろいろな地域、紛争地帯も含めて、過去の歴史、文化、そして政治的な状況、全く違うものに、すべてとどめをかけるように核兵器の禁止というのを非常に難しい。そうではなくて、それぞれの地域に特定の条約を締結していく方が現実的ではないかというお話です。
It's not generally known, but in fact, every country in the southern hemisphere is part of a nuclear weapons-free zone. And taken together, the nuclear weapons-free zones cover all of the southern hemisphere.
皆さんご存知のように、地球上南半球のすべての地域はこの非核兵器地帯条約でカバーをされているということを指摘していきたいと思います。
The most urgent need, apart from Northeast Asia, is Central Europe, where the main roadblock for many years has been the United States' insistence and NATO's insistence that NATO countries could store American nuclear weapons on their territory.
今、アメリカがご存知のように、自国の核兵器を違う他国の領土の上に配備をしているような状況の中で、今、喫緊の話題として、やはりこの北東アジアの非核兵器地帯条約を進めていくべきだというふうに理解しております。
I have long believed that the United States should withdraw all its nuclear weapons from Europe and work for a nuclear weapons-free zone in Central Europe.
今、国連の方では、中東におけるこの核兵器禁止条約というのを長年議論しておりますが、私の意見によれば、アメリカが今、核共有という形で、ヨーロッパの5カ国に配備をしているこの核兵器については、今すぐこれを撤去するというのは、賢明ではないというふうに考えています。
Thank you.
Dr. Harperi, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank
So your suggestion is very logistic and diplomatic and very helpful. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. My name is Mariko Shiguchi. So I'd like to ask you straightly. So your suggestion is basically to recognize the nuclear deterrence. Is it right?
I'm sorry? I didn't quite understand it.
So your presentation is basically to recognize the nuclear deterrence in this area. Is the first recognition. So is it right, to my understanding?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
To recognize a nuclear deterrence, nuclear
Yes.
weapon is useful to security in this area
Yes,
at present. So, I mean, your suggestion is including the role of the NGO community, including, that means including the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki community. So they strongly insist not to recognize the nuclear deterrence to security in this area. So that is one of very important point. So that's why I would like to ask you actually. Could you understand?
Could I intervene a little bit?
Please.
Yes. 串口先生のおっしゃっている、肝のところは、要するに核抑止というものをどう考えるのか、核抑止を認めるのかという質問だと思います。日本は広島、長崎以来ですね、やっぱりこの核抑止を認めない。要するに核というものがあれば使ってしまうんだと。核抑止のない平和な世界を作っていこうではないかというラインですよね。それに対して今、ポジティブ・ネガティブ・セキュリティ・アシュランス、積極的、そして消極的、核抑止と言わないですが、安全保障ということを考えたときに、一番の話は、それでは北東アジア非核兵器地帯条約が締結されました。この地域には核兵器はありませんと。周辺の核兵器国もここに対しては攻撃や威嚇をしませんということが決められた後に、それでは核攻撃が日本に対して起こったときどうするんだという議論なんです。ハルペリン博士の議論。でその時に違う方を差し出すのか、それとも核攻撃が日本にあった時に、もうこの時点で北東アジア非核兵器地帯条約というものがなくなってしまった。その時点でもし日米安保条約がまだあれば、この核攻撃を行った国に対してアメリカが何らかの形の報復攻撃をするであろうということがこの議論の中核で、この話はハリペリン教授も多分日本の核抑止を認めないという今までの積み重ねてきた議論は多分よくご存知ないと思うんで、私から少し説明してよろしいですか？よろしいですか？ It's a little bit long, but Dr. Howard, Representative Kushibuchi's argument is very, very important for Hiroshima Nagasaki initiatives, because as we experience such a horrific atomic bomb attack, our sentiment is we don't admit the nuclear deterrence itself.
right.
Therefore, in the context of Northeast Asia nuclear weapon free zone, what you are saying is after we successfully established nuclear weapon free zone in this area, and we become the nuclear weapon free zone. However, when some country attack with a nuclear weapon on the soil of Japan after such a treaty, how do we react to this? And if that happens, then Northeast Asia nuclear weapon free zone treaty is void. And if that's the moment, we still have U.S.-Japan treaty for the security assurance. Then U.S. might be able to react to such nuclear attack using or not using nuclear weapons. That's what I understood. Is this correct?
That's correct. So I think the goal we all agree is the elimination of nuclear weapons. And we all agree that the slogan of the campaign has to be that nuclear wars cannot be won and should not be fought. And that anything less than that is simply an interim step towards the goal of ridding the world of nuclear weapons and the threat of the use of nuclear weapons.
もちろん、核兵器のない世界、核抑止というもののない世界を目指すというゴールは同じです。その過程にある現在、核兵器禁止条約というものに守られていると、それが今の目標なんですけど、その後ですね、その地域が核攻撃を受けた場合に、じゃあどうなるということについては、この条約の議論の外にあるのではないかということになります。で、一つ質問してもよろしいですか、私の方から。全く同じ議論がですね、南太平洋非核兵器地帯条約を締結する際に、やっぱり日米同盟とか韓米同盟と同じようなアンダスという、オーストラリアとニュージーランドの同盟関係があったわけですね。でその時に、オーストラリアが取った道とニュージーランドが取った道がやっぱりだいぶ違っているということについて、博士のご意見を伺いたいと思います。My question to you is that at the time of the establishment of the South Pacific Nuclear Weapon Free Zone, they had UNGAS treaty with the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. And to have both UNGAS treaty and South Pacific Area Nuclear Weapon Free Zone, their political path was quite different, Australia and New Zealand. Can you explain how?
I'm sorry, are you asking me? I'm afraid I don't know the details of that episode, so I'm not able to respond.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. このアンガスと南太平洋の非核兵器地帯条約のディテールについては、私は承知してないので、コメントは差し控えたいと思います。これはもうかなり研究の論文も出てますので、相当ニュージーランド方式、オーストラリア方式を少し勉強してですね、今、博士がおっしゃったように、NGO が中心になって、これ、かなり細かい勉強グループというのを立ち上げるべきだとおっしゃっているので、これは今後の参考にしていきたいと思います。
日本語で大丈夫です。お知らせで。Dr. Harping, I'd like to express my profound gratitude for your grateful speech and presentation. I would like to hear again why the United States abandoned the use of nuclear first strikes. Please.
Why?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Why the United States abandoned the use of nuclear first strikes? Why?
It hasn't abandoned them. It specifically reserves the right to use them. But what it has said is that the appropriate response to the use of nuclear weapons by another state may not be to use nuclear weapons in response, but to seek to end the conflict as quickly as possible. And if possible, remove from power the people who decided to use nuclear weapons. I think we all understand that if the first use is followed by a second use, that there's likely then to be a third use, and that the world may not survive the exchange of nuclear weapons. And therefore, it is most important to prevent the first use of nuclear weapons. And it's, in my view, remarkable that we've gone as long as we have without the use after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But if there is to be a third use, the goal must be to stop it immediately, to make sure that the country that used the nuclear weapon does not benefit from that use, but not to continue down a path which will just mean the end of civilization.
どうしてアメリカが核の先制不使用に合意するという余地があるんだという質問だったんですけれども、やっぱり核の先制使用をしてしまうということは第二撃の反撃、それに対するまた反撃というふうにどんどんエスカレーションしていってしまうということはこれはもう明白であって、 これを避けるために核に先制不使用というのは当然やらなければいけない。ただ、今世界中にアメリカが展開をして、そういうことを言っておりませんので、これを、まずは北東アジア非核兵器地帯条約、そして実はその前のですね、南米のトラテラル港という非核兵器地帯条約で守られた地域に対してアメリカはこれを防衛していますので、その宣伝もあるということでございます。
むしろ私が聞いたのは逆で、全く I agree 100% with you, but I questioned about why the United States abandoned the use of nuclear force strikes at the request of the Japanese government. But it is hard to believe that the Japanese government has such power. We are very weak and like protectorate. But could you please provide more details about this background, please?
About why the United States might abandon first use of nuclear weapons?
No, there was, excuse me. No, there was a rumor in Japan that the US almost adopted like a Chinese or, Russia that nuclear first strike will be avoided. No first use was really seriously considered in the Capitol Hill. However, upon the request of Japanese government saying that's not permissible for Japanese, do you know this conversation?
I know about this episode. It occurred during the time of the Congressional Nuclear Commission that I served on with Bill Perry and Jim Schlesinger, and I'm not in a position to comment on that. I think the United States has long been opposed to a nuclear no first use promise, and I think continues to observe that in terms of its own strategic interests as it understands them. I do not agree with them. I published my first article on no first use in 1960, and I continue to believe that it is the only path forward.
おっしゃる通り、それ自体があったようです。私も実は、ドクター・ハルペリーも実はこのビル・ペリーがやっておりました、アメリカの一人の委員会に私も出席しておりましたが、そういう経緯はあったようです。ただ私個人としては1960年代からアメリカが核に先制不使用ということは、私も主張しておりますので、これは変えないと主張していきたいというふうに考えております。Thank you so much. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Halperin. Time is up, and as you hinted and suggested and detailed the future forward that we are preparing for the Chinese counterparts, to meet with the Chinese counterparts, we are preparing for it. And P3+3 delegation will be visiting China soon. And the second schedule will be on the 29th of July in Geneva. There's NPT PrepCon, and we have reserved a meeting room for a side event for this 3+3 Northeast Asian Nuclear Reason. And at the same time, we are, as you suggested, we will be start preparing for the technical working group for the US, South Korea, Japan, statement for the picture of the Northeast Asia nuclear free zone. So we're going forward from here. And thank you again for your precious time and your presentation.
Not at all. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking my proposal seriously, and hopefully we can work together in moving it forward.
どうもありがとうございました。私の提案を真摯に受け止めていただいて感謝申し上げます。これにて今日を開きとさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.